Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Yashoda Nandana Bhajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Bhajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Srila Prabhupada Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajik Acharya Asatarsa Sri Srimad ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishya Om Vishnupad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopanath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Brajabhumi Namadam Ki Jai Shri Namadi Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Lachal Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Gangamayi Ki Jai Jamunamayi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Shrimati Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Most beautiful Lordship Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai Shri Shri Gauranitai Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Going back to home, back to Godhead Ki Jai ISKCON New York Yatra Ki Jai Brihad Madanga Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai International Food for Life Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Nittai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol All glories to the Assembly devotees, all glories to the Assembly devotees, all glories to the Assembly devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga Guru Srila Prabhupada. Narayanam namaskritya Naram chaiva narottamam Deving saraswatim vyasam Tato jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a rare means of conquest, let us offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, who is the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Preshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly attending the Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, whose worship with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Now, before we start, two things. Jayant, if you could please straighten out that picture of Radha Krishna on the boat. It's disturbing when the paintings are, a kilter. It needs to go counterclockwise a bit. A little more. Yeah, there you go. So we should regularly check the paintings, make sure they're straight. When it's like that, it means that we're not paying attention. So we should pay attention to everything in the temple room, make sure it's nice. Why? Not for my senses or your senses, but for the pleasure of the deities and Srila Prabhupada. Everything should be pukka. Very nice. Now, normally Hansarupa is giving class on Sunday, and he reads first from Lilamrita. So just to keep the same mood, I'm going to read something about Prabhupada, but not from Lilamrita. We'll allow him to pick up where he left off. But while I was in Mauritius in December, my dear godbrother Subhag Maharaj, how many of you have met Subhag Maharaj? Anybody? Subhag Swami, Subhag Maharaj. He's originally from Bengal. He had gone to school in London, so he met the devotees in London and became a devotee there, and met Prabhupada there, got initiated. So while I was there, he was, as we say colloquially, peddling his remembrances of Prabhupada. It's called Srila Prabhupada Smaranamrita. So I purchased a copy. I always like to support my godbrothers. And he's such a humble soul, he wrote, "You are a Vaishnava. I wish I can learn about Krishna consciousness from you." That's how humble he is. I'm not a Vaishnava. Compared to Subhag Maharaj, I'm an ant. But anyway, I thought I'd read just a couple of entries here. So he says, "My first interaction with Srila Prabhupada," that's the title of this remembrance. "A few months passed and news came that Srila Prabhupada would be visiting London. I was told that Prabhupada, like me, was from Bengal. I did not go to the airport like others, but remained at the temple for other services. Prabhupada went to his room on the first floor, and that's by European and Indian standards, not like America. America, this is the first floor. But in Europe and India, this is the ground floor, and the next floor up is the first floor. So I was coming down from the first floor to the ground floor, and suddenly Prabhupada came from the bathroom to enter his room. At once I paid my obeisances upon seeing him." Imagine, we come every morning, we bow down, but if you really see Prabhupada, the impact is amazing. Suddenly, Prabhupada, at once I paid my obeisance upon seeing him. Suddenly, Prabhupada turned and looked at me. Quote, "What is your name?" He asked. "Where do you come from?" I became nervous. Unconsciously, I spoke in Bengali. Prabhupada said, "Oh, you're from Kolkata. Come to my room." I entered Prabhupada's room. He asked a few questions regarding my family background. He ordered that every day I should come to his room as long as he was there. That's Prabhupada. Prabhupada is very personal. Very personal. Imagine how many disciples he had, but he was very, very personal. So we'll say, we'll read one more offering. His elegant way of training. Once I was alone with Prabhupada and he was very grave. Prabhupada had a stack of books. I started to read one of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's books. Prabhupada firmly remarked, "No, put it back." I felt that at all times Prabhupada was watching me, observing my each and every move. I remember Prabhupada's eyes were very deep. I was convinced that he knew my past, present, and future. He pointed at something I couldn't understand. What does he need? I was thinking. Again he pointed. This time I could understand he was referring to tilak. Now listen to this very carefully. I brought the tilak to Prabhupada. He then commented in a deep tone, quote, "Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told his followers that without tilak, the forehead is like a smashan, crematorium." Take that seriously. He would send his students home to apply tilak if they did not have it. It is inauspicious, Prabhupada said. So take that to heart. Actually, I'll read one more. Very short. This one is entitled Loving Chastisement. Another day he called me and told, quote, "Stay in my room for the day." Sitting for a while in Prabhupada's room, I again took out that book of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I forgot that he had already made clear. I forgot what he had already made clear. Prabhupada became angry. "Go and sit outside." After some time, Prabhupada again called me inside and told me to sit in the corner. He was always chastising me like a father, cutting my pride with his strong words. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this is why it's important to hear devotees' remembrances of Prabhupada, because we learn a lot of Prabhupada's mood, how he interacted with his disciples, instructions like always wear tilak. Sometimes we put it aside, but I try to always adhere to that. No matter where I'm going, just to Trader Joe's or whatever, I make sure I wear tilak. And as I've told the story before, last year I went to Trader Joe's wearing tilak, and one of the employees came up to me and said, "Oh, you're a Hare Krishna. When is your festival? I want to come." It had already gone. I said, "Oh, you missed it. It was last week." He said, "Oh," he was so disappointed. So if we allow people to understand that we're devotees, just like the policemen, they wear their uniform. If you go to the hospital, the doctors wear a uniform, the nurses wear a uniform, everywhere. And even those who claim they don't wear uniform, they wear uniform, t-shirt and jeans, right? That's everybody's uniform out there. Wear a t-shirt and jeans. So everybody belongs to some camp. So we should let people know which camp we belong to. Okay? All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're continuing our reading from the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is chapter 15, the appearance and coronation of Prithu Maharaj. And make this a little bigger. We'll be reading from text 11 to text 16. 11 through 15 have no purport, so I'll read the Sanskrit and translation, and then we can responsively do text number 16. So 11. Tasya abhisheka arabdho brahmanaya brahmavadibihi abhishecha nikanyasmai ajakru sarvato janaha. Prabhupada's translation. The learned brahmanas who were very attached to the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies then arranged for the king's coronation. People from all directions collected all the different paraphernalia for the ceremony. Thus, everything was complete. Text 12. Sarit samudra kirayo naga gavakaga mrigaha dhyav kritik sarvabhutani samajahrur upayanam. Translation. All the rivers, seas, hills, mountains, serpents, cows, birds, animals, heavenly planets, the earthly planet, and all other living entities collected various presentations according to their ability to offer the king. So the lesson we learn from this shloka is that these are all personalities, just like we say Ganga Mai, Yamuna Mai, but all rivers have personalities, not just Ganga and Yamuna. Godavari, Saraswati, Narbade, Sindhu, Kaveri, all of these rivers, and all rivers everywhere. And the seas, the hills, the mountains, serpents, cows, birds, animals. There's personality everywhere. So this business of impersonalism doesn't make any sense. That ultimately we are impersonal. No, there's always personality everywhere we look. Even what seems to be inanimate, like hills and mountains, they have personality. And therefore, one of the names of Mother Parvati is Girija. Girija. She took birth from Giri, from the hill or mountain. So 13. So Bhishikto Maharaja Suasak Sarvalankritaha Patnyar Chishalankrit Patnyar Chishalankritaya Virejagnir Ivaparaha. Thus the great King Prithu, exquisitely dressed with garments and ornaments, was coronated and placed on the throne. The king and his wife, Archie, who was also exquisitely ornamented, appeared exactly like fire. Now, this is not surprising because I think the last class I gave, or maybe the one before that, I recounted the story of King Nriga. And he was saying how he gave unlimited cows in charity, but they were not just given like naked cows. They were all decorated. They had blankets, they had gold on their horns and silver on their hooves. So ornamentation is natural. In the spiritual world, everything and everyone is ornamented. So that's why we have the desire to ornament ourselves and to ornament others. Text 14. Tasmai Jahara Dhannado Haimang Viravarasanam Varunak Salilash Shrabam Ata Patrang Shashi Prabham. Translation: the great sage continued, my dear Vidura, Kuvera presented the great King Prithu with a golden throne. The demigod Varuna presented him with an umbrella that constantly sprayed fine particles of water and was as brilliant as the moon. So Varuna is the god of water. Therefore, it makes sense that he gives an umbrella that constantly sprays fine particles of water. Text 15. Vayushavala vyajane dharma kirtimayim shajam indra kiritam utkritstam dandang samyamanang yamaha. The demigod of air, Vayu, presented King Prithu with 2 whisks, chamaras. So we use that in our ceremonies here. 2 whisks of hair. The king of religion, Dharma, presented him with a flower garland which would expand his fame. How does a flower garland expand fame? We have experience, again, in our society and in India in general. If somebody is important or you want to make them feel important, you give them a garland. The king of heaven, Indra, presented him with a valuable helmet, and the superintendent of death, Yamaraj, presented him with a scepter with which to rule the world. Jai Shishi Radha Govinda Ki Jai, Giraj Govardhan Ki Jai, Shishi Gaurnitai Bhagavan Ki Jai. So what is a scepter? A scepter is a rod that royalty or monarchs, they carry to show that they're in charge. And generally it's nicely ornamented, even with valuable jewels like that. So it's a special rod, just like sannyasis carry a danda. The king or the emperor carries a scepter, which is a special rod. Now 16 we'll do responsively. Brahma Brahmayang Varma. No, that last A in the first word is long. Sanskrit is actually very easy to pronounce if you follow the rules. Every syllable is given the same stress, except when there is a diacritic mark. Then you stress that particular. So it's Brahma, Brahmamayang Bharma, Bharati Haramuttamam Harik Sudarshanang Chakram Tat Patnyavahatang Shriyam Brahma Brahmamayang Varma Bharati Haramuttamam Harik Sudarshanang Chakram Tatpatnyavahatang Shriyam Brahma Brahmayang Varma Bharati Haramuttamam Harik Sudarshanang Chakram Tatpatnyavahatang Shriyam. Set. Tatpatnyavahatang Brahma Brahmamayang Varma Bharati Haramuttamam Harik Sudarshanang Chakram Tatpatnyavahatang Shriyam Brahma Brahmayam Varma Brahmamayam Bharati Haramuttamam Harik Sudarshanang Chakram Tatpatnyavahatang Shriyam. Anybody else? Everybody chanted? Brahma Brahmamayam Varma Bharati Haramuttamam Harik Sudarshanang Chakram Tatpatnyavahatang Shriyam. Okay, synonyms. Brahma, Lord Brahma. Brahmamayam, made of spiritual knowledge. Varma, armor. Bharati, the goddess of learning. Haram, necklace. Uttamam, transcendental. Harihi, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sudarshanang Chakram, Sudarshana disc. Tatpatni, his wife, Lakshmi. Avyahatam, imperishable. Shriyam, beauty and opulence. Srila Prabhupada's translation for this verse. Lord Brahma presented King Prithu with a protective garment made of spiritual knowledge. Bharati, Saraswati, the wife of Brahma, gave him a transcendental necklace. Lord Vishnu presented him with a Sudarshana disc, and Lord Vishnu's wife, the goddess of fortune, gave him imperishable opulences. Please repeat. Lord Brahma presented King Prithu with a protective garment made of spiritual knowledge. Bharati, Saraswati, the wife of Brahma, gave him a transcendental necklace. Lord Vishnu presented him with a Sudarshana disc. Now, those of you who grew up speaking Hindi, you drop that last A, but in Sanskrit you don't. It's not Sudarshan, it's Sudarshana. Lord Vishnu presented him with a Sudarshana disc, and Lord Vishnu's wife, the goddess of fortune, gave him imperishable opulences. Now, one little note before we proceed to the purport. We have the word Bharati, which is the name of Saraswati. So those of you especially who operate the cash registers, you know this is called Bharati Center. But do you know the history behind it? Why it's called Bharati Center? Because this complex that we've established in Radha Govinda Mandir in was previously a Jewish community center. And many of you may not be aware, but quite a few, a high percentage of Prabhupada's first disciples, like Brahmananda and his brother, and so many, they were from the Jewish community. So the Jewish community was a little upset that so many of our sons are becoming Hare Krishnas. So when they were approached to sell this building to the Hare Krishnas, they didn't want to. So we came back, because Krishna gives intelligence, created Bharati Center. Came back, and they sold it to us. So, just a part of ISKCON history. So, Srila Prabhupada's purport. All the demigods presented various gifts to King Prithu. Hari, an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Upendra in the heavenly planet, presented the king with a Sudarshana disc. It should be understood that this Sudarshana disc is not exactly the same type of Sudarshana disc used by the Personality of Godhead Krishna or Vishnu. Since Maharaj Prithu was a partial representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's power, the Sudarshana disc given to him represented the partial power of the original Sudarshana disc. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Paschachadeshtarine Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtang Stapitang Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyahang Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Ragana Tandatam Tang Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangsha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate So Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosate Tapta, Kanchana, Gaurangi, Radhe, Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Haripriye, Vancha Kalpatarubhya Sha Kripa Sindhubhe Evacha, Patitanang Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, one note before we say a few words about the purport is that Haladhar Maharaj was supposed to come and give the class tonight. So I was asking, where is everything going to go in according to schedule? And I was informed that his flight was canceled because he was in Dubai when this war broke out. And these crazy people, they're actually bombing the airport in Dubai. So we pray that all devotees, not only in Dubai but everywhere, remain safe. It's a crazy world that we're living in, crazy time. As I said last night when I spoke at 26th Avenue, for a long time I've been saying, it's not that the world is falling apart, it has fallen apart. So the lesson to us, as aspiring servants of the Lord, don't make plans for happiness on this planet or anywhere in the material world. As Krishna says, Dukkalayam ashashvatam, it's temporary and it's full of misery. But the conditioned souls, because we're rebellious, we want to prove Krishna wrong. Krishna says it's a place of misery. No, I'm going to make such plans, make so much money that I'll be happy. It's not going to happen. So give it up. Just surrender to Krishna, and gradually our happiness will increase as the ignorance and sinful tendencies decrease. So back to today's purport. Where is this pastime taking place? of Prithu's appearance and coronation? Where is it taking place? On the Earth planet. It's taking place on the Earth planet. And how do we know that? Because later on in the pastime, it specifically stated that Mother Earth, what's her name? Bhumi. And that's another indication that everything is personal. Every planet has a predominating deity. So when we're walking on this Earth planet, we should be conscious we're actually walking on Mother Bhumi. And therefore we treat with respect. Prabhupada was upset if we mistreated even some apparently inanimate object, because everything ultimately, Krishna is there in every atom, in between every atom. So we treat everything with respect. What to speak of everyone? If we treat everything with respect, then there's no question of mistreating anyone. So later on in the pastime, Mother Bhumi, she refuses to supply the necessities because it's under her control. We're thinking that we till the field and we plant some seeds and we pray for rain and everything. No, everything is under control. Mother Bhumi may not give the necessary nutrients for those plants. Indra may not necessarily send the rain that's required. The sun may withhold his... Anything can happen because everything is under personal control. So later on, Mother Bhumi withholds, and then we know Prithu chastises her. So that's how we know for sure this pastime is going on the Earth planet. And then again, at least at that time means at that particular time in universal chronology, the demigods, well, not only at that time, the demigods are always aware of what's going on here. It's stated elsewhere that the demigods used to come here regularly, but now in Kali Yuga, it's like a bad neighborhood. The Earth planet is like a bad neighborhood. So just like there's some bad neighborhoods in Brooklyn here that you don't want to go to, at least don't go alone. So similarly, the Earth planet is like a bad neighborhood in the universe now, so the demigods don't come, but they're still aware of what's going on here. So obviously they were aware of what was going on the Earth planet, that Prithu is appearing, so they all came. Brahma and his wife. What's her name? Bharati or Saraswati. And Varuna and Yamaraj, all the major demigods, they came and made presentations to Prithu Maharaj because they knew that he was an empowered Shaktyavesh avatar. And they knew his mission. And they were happy. Because as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that he sends forth generations of humans and demigods and tells the humans to make sacrifices for the pleasure of the demigods. And in this way, everybody becomes pleased. The demigods are pleased, they supply the necessities of life. And then the humans are pleased, and the animals, everybody's pleased. But in Kali Yuga, nobody believes in sacrifice, at least not the sacrifices that are recommended in the Vedas. And therefore, they sacrifice anyway. They have to set the alarm to get up at 4 o'clock so they can put on their t-shirt and jeans or whatever they wear to work, get on the train. Prabhupada used to say, he noticed that in India, people are getting up so early to take a train ride for an hour or 2 hours to get to Mumbai, Bombay it was called at the time, and rush to office to be on time, and then they spend a whole day in the office, and then again another 2-hour train ride to get home. They barely have time to eat something and then have to go to sleep, and the whole process, that's sacrifice. That's sacrifice. It's not like nowadays some of you are allowed to work from home or work from temple. No, in those days, work means you have to go to work. You have to show up. So the sacrifice, this business of making sacrifice for the pleasure of higher authorities, this is more or less ingrained in Vedic culture, or the vestiges of Vedic culture remaining in India and elsewhere, that you must sacrifice. And all of you young men here, you know that. To get your degree, you had to sacrifice like anything. While some of your friends were out getting high or whatever, you had to stay home and study and study and study. Because not only is it difficult, but it's very competitive in India. You may think you're number one, but there's somebody who's just a little bit better than you, and they get into IIT instead of you. So life in general is like that. You have to sacrifice to attain whatever you want materially, what to speak of for the higher goal of spiritual advancement, spiritual realization, self-realization. One has to be ready to sacrifice. Now, in other ages, we know the recommended methodology was different. Krite, who knows that verse? Kriteya Jayato Vishnum. In the Golden Age, Satya Yuga, what was recommended sacrifice? Yes. Long-term meditation. Papa used to say, what is this meditation they're peddling here in the West? You go to some yoga studio, you sit down, meditate for 5 minutes, and then you go outside and smoke a cigarette. What are you going to get from that? Cheaters, and the cheated. But in the Satya Yuga, how long did people live? What was the lifespan expected? 100,000 years. And they were willing to sacrifice 30, 40, 50,000 of those years just to meditate, come to the perfectional stage of meditation. And the atmosphere was peaceful. You didn't hear some police car or ambulance going by every 5 minutes. You didn't hear people yelling and screaming. Last night when I was coming home from 26th 2nd Avenue, some guy, just as I came out of 26th, some guy was going down the street yelling and cursing. And this happens all the time because people are pugla. They're crazy. They're crazy. They're born crazy from crazy parents, and they engage in activities that make them crazier. And it's not obvious just from the externals. I've told this story many times, but it has always stuck with me. That if you go to Central Park, when you're looking north on the west side, there's a famous building called the Dakota. A lot of wealthy people live there. So this one young lady, she was still pretty young, in her 30s. She had inherited her parents' money. She was a millionaire many times over. And she had this routine. It was in the news. She had this routine every day. I didn't know her personally, but the story was in the news. Every day she would come out of her apartment, go into Central Park, take a walk, and then go back home. And home means, again, Dakota. Doorman opens the door. Everything pucka. But one day, she did her routine. She came down, she went to Central Park, went back home, and jumped out the window. Now here's a young lady, millions of dollars in the bank, but the mind is not in order. And that is true for almost everyone in Kali Yuga. Everybody you meet, you should know in advance, this is a crazy fellow or a crazy woman. They're crazy. Why? Because they have crazy aspirations. They have no idea of what is the goal of life and how to achieve it. Their aspirations are simply material, and so much so that they're willing to engage in sinful activities constantly. Even those who have made it in terms of the material necessities and money. And there's another story that was in the news right here in New York. One Indian fellow had come to New York, come to America, came from a poor background, not from a wealthy Mumbai or Delhi family. No, poor guy came here, and through education, he became wealthy. He went into business and became a millionaire many, many times over. But still greedy, still wanted more. So he engaged in some scheme, insider trading, some Wall Street scheme, and he got caught and put in jail. So that's crazy. You come from a poor background. You come to America, and through your education and struggle, you become wealthy. Why engage in something that's illegal? Why take that chance? But no, people are so crazy, so greedy. So we should always remember that in the conditioned state of life, we have 6 enemies: lust, anger, greed, envy, illusion, and madness. These are the 6 enemies of the soul in conditioned life. And we can tell when we're making advancement when those things stop bothering us, they go down. We are not lusty anymore, lusting after. And it's not just lust for sensual enjoyment, lust for money, lust to control others. Lust takes different forms. So we should see in our lives, by chanting Hare Krishna, which we're getting back to, that these things are not disturbing us so much anymore. We're not lusty for sensual enjoyment or to control others or for money. We're not greedy. We're not envious. We don't get angry so easily. Because anger is born out of frustration when our lusty desires are not satisfied. We become angry. So, Kam, Krodh, Lobha, Moha, Mada, and Matsarya. These are the 6 enemies: lust, anger, greed, envy, illusion, and ultimately madness. Because each of those things are a sign of madness. To lust after sense gratification. What is that sense gratification? Bringing 2 material bodies together. Every one of us has a material body. We know what it's made of. Skin and blood and bone and other nasty substances inside. But because we don't want to surrender to Krishna, our vision becomes covered by Maya. Maya literally means not this. So what we're lusting after is not the thing that's going to give us the happiness that we're looking for. So, Kritaya Jayato Vishnu. Then the next age, Tretayam Yajato Makai. So what is the recommended process for Treta Yuga? Tretayam Yajato Makai. Sacrifice, elaborate sacrifices, which are supposed to be led by the head of the state. This is one of the functions that the head of the state is supposed to engage in. To bring the citizens together to perform elaborate sacrifices for the satisfaction of Vishnu, or Krishna. But to do that, to perform such sacrifices, you need, first of all, qualified brahmanas. That's the first requirement. No qualified brahmana, no sacrifice. It's just a show. It's just a show. You have to have qualified brahmanas who can recite the Vedic mantras precisely, with such precision that the test was they could take an old cow or bull, put the animal in the sacrificial fire, and by mantras bring that same animal out in a young form. You go in as an old bull, you come out as a young calf. It shows the precision of the power of the mantras. But even before that, because there are 4 kinds of brahmanas required for each sacrifice, and one of them was a brahmana who could light fire by mantra. Anybody here have that potency? You can't find a lighter, somebody's waiting to offer Tulsi Puja, and you just, you're chanting the right mantra, fire appears. So there are no such brahmanas anymore. Maybe there's one hiding in some cave in Himalayas, who knows, but so you need one brahmana who could light fire without taking help from other fire, a brahmana who could recite the Vedic mantras precisely, a brahmana who was the overall, we say nowadays, referee or supervisor. Like that, you need all these qualified brahmanas for sacrifice. And then on top of that, the government had to have enough wealth that they could sacrifice tons and tons of ghee and grains into the fire. Nowadays, some governments are so wealthy, but they're stupid and they're greedy. They sacrifice or dump tons and tons of grains into the ocean because they don't want us to bring down the price of the commodity. And they don't want to give it away for free. So they dump it literally. They do that sometimes. They have so much wheat or so much rice or whatever, and they don't want to put it on the market because it will bring the price down, and they don't want to give it away to some poor country, so they just dump it in the ocean. That's sinful. That's sinful. Putting it in a sacrificial fire, that's recommended. Because that kind of sacrifice will satisfy the demigods and ultimately the Supreme Lord, and then they supply even more. But these sinful people nowadays, they, through sinful methods, because they don't pray for rain, at least they don't perform the proper sacrifices for rain, and they, by chemical means, usually they squeeze as much out of the earth as possible, and then when they have too much, they dump it. So, Kritaya Jayato Vishnu, Tretayam Yajato Makai. Dwapare Parichayayam. What is the recommended sacrifice of Dwapara Yuga? elaborate worship of the deities in the temples. And therefore you find, because Dwapara Yuga ended how long ago? 5,000 years. How do we know? Because it says that Kali Yuga starts when Krishna leaves. Krishna sadama pagate, dharma jnana divisaha, kalo nashyarishangesha, pura narka dodita. That when Krishna leaves, everything good goes to him. Krishna swadama, he goes back to his own dharma. Upagate. Dharma means, what does dharma mean? No. Prabhupada said dharma doesn't mean religion. That's how the outsiders translate it. They translate dharma as religion. But dharma means the intrinsic quality. And what is the intrinsic quality of the living entity, the jiva? To serve, yeah. So, in Dwapara Yuga, elaborate temples, and that's why in India you find so many ancient temples. Sometimes they guess, it's maybe 1,000 years old or whatever, but some of them go back to Dwapara Yuga. Ancient temples. Recently, TOVP, they posted on YouTube, they have a YouTube channel, about the progress of the building of the TOVP. And one atheistic guy, first of all, he said, it's not going to last because you guys use steel. He said, if you want it to last, it should be all stone construction, this and that. Whole long diatribe. So I wrote back, I said, first of all, there are certain metallic structures, some of you may know, in India that have been around for more than 1,000 years, almost 2,000 years, if not more. So it depends on how the metal is produced. It's not that all steel deteriorates after a couple of hundred years. Depending on how that column, famous column, made of iron, but it was made in such a way that the iron produces a patina, a covering, and it hasn't rusted for, they say, at least 1,600 years it's been there. So that's the first thing I pointed out. I said, you're making assumptions. And over and above that, if it's Krishna's will that the TOVP stand for thousands of years, it will stand. So this atheist wrote back and said, God's will, there is no God. Everybody knows that. Any intelligent person knows that. So I wrote back to him. I said, it's amazing how the atheists, first of all, think that because they think there is no God, then there is no God. And over and above that, they think because we think like that, then we're intelligent. And anybody who doesn't agree with us is not intelligent. Just see the fun. First of all, they think that because they think there is no God, then there is no God. But is that a fact? Just because you think something doesn't exist, it doesn't exist? Or if you think that something exists, that it must exist? Like the singularity that supposedly exploded and created the universe, they think it existed. Does that mean it actually existed? We know it's not the fact. The fact is that Mahavishnu, as we heard recently, reading, lies down in the causal ocean. And from his breathing, the universes come out in seed form and then they expand. And they continue to expand until he inhales, and then they come back down and re-enter his body. And this is what drives them crazy. They can't understand why the universe seems to keep expanding. Why not reach a steady state and then stop? Because everything requires some force behind it. Any motion requires some force. And we know from experience that if something explodes, yes, it gives an initial force that produces motion to the things that have been exploded. But over some time, it stops. It doesn't keep going. When you light a firecracker, boom, all of that paper and gunpowder and all that flies everywhere. But then it falls and it settles and it stops. So in terms of the universe, what is that force that keeps making the universe expand? They can't understand. They can't say. but they accept that it was not God, some other reason. So we say, if you can't prove your theory, which they cannot prove that there was a Big Bang, and even amongst the scientific community, now a lot of them are saying, no, that doesn't make sense. But still they teach it in school. Cheaters. So we say, if you believe in the Big Bang theory, and you think that God is also just a theory, then why not allow both to exist? The God theory and the Big Bang theory. But they've decided in advance that the God theory is not a fact. But we will eventually prove that the Big Bang theory is actually correct. Or we'll prove that everything started with matter. So I wrote that to this fellow. I said, you don't believe in God, but you're conscious. Explain, please, take as much time as you want, how it is that inert, unconscious matter becomes conscious. That's the dilemma that faces them. And they can't get around it. You can't get around it. Because based on your presumptions, everything started from a material particle, and it exploded to produce greater material particles. Eventually, the elements that we know, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, all these things came out of that little particle. But we know oxygen is not conscious. Nitrogen is not conscious. Carbon, all these elements, they're not conscious. So please prove how you can combine these unconscious elements to make a conscious being. They can't. So that was the end of the conversation. Once I told them that, you're conscious, explain how consciousness arises from unconscious matter. No more response. Because they can't. So in essence, what we prove to them when we go down that line of thinking is that you make fun of people who believe in God. You know, it's just a belief. You can't prove that. Show me God. You can't prove that. But you can't prove either. So it's just as much a religion as any other religion. The belief in the Big Bang and the belief that things are materially caused, everything is materially caused, it's a religion. And you can't prove otherwise. And I put one such atheist on the spot. Once I was invited to USC. Most of you have heard of that college in Los Angeles. So they had a panel discussion. They invited representatives of different religions and one atheist. So I was the representative of Hinduism. So the Christian spoke, and then the Imam spoke about, and then some other person spoke, and then the atheist, it was his turn. So he said, you're all very nice people, but you're missing the point. You're missing the point. There is no God. There is no God. This is just belief. This is just religious sentiment, which is okay, but it doesn't. So then my turn came. And I gave him the same kind of treatment that I gave this guy on YouTube. That you're conscious. We're interacting consciously. You're conscious of me. I'm conscious of you. Explain how consciousness arose in your religion, your science religion. He was stumped. Nobody ever put that on his plate, which is obvious. It's obvious. Consciousness is the driving force in the universe. Simple example again, I've used many times. This podium made of wood. So that wood was obtained from a tree. The tree didn't turn itself into planks. Somebody cut that tree down, conscious person with a vision, cut that tree down. And have you ever seen how they turn a huge tree into horizontal planks? Big machinery required. Or if it's small enough, two guys with a guide and a particular kind of saw. But you can turn that circular or elliptical trunk into perfectly horizontally flat planks. So somebody did that and then put it up for sale, most likely. And then somebody came along with another vision, a conscious person. I want to make a podium. So went to the wood market and bought the right kind of wood and cut it into the right size pieces. Consciousness. So consciousness is obviously the driving force in the universe. So if you can't explain where consciousness comes from, then we don't want to hear anything you have to say. Because whatever you have to say is not going to be worth listening to. If you can't explain consciousness, so we are very fortunate. We are in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Because the highest form of consciousness is consciousness of God, of Krishna. And therefore, everything makes sense when you start out with consciousness of the actual source of everything. Last night I spoke on 9/8. And Krishna is saying that all of these manifestations are coming from me. I have manifested them. I manifested them in the past. And by my will, they also are annihilated. And it goes on cyclically. Just like now we're coming to the end of winter. As winter is going to be followed by spring. And after spring comes summer, and after summer comes fall. We know the cycle just keeps going on. So similarly, Krishna or God, he puts all these cycles into motion. All these cycles into motion. Creation, maintenance, destruction, and then a gap, a long gap, and then again the cycle goes. Not like winter is followed exactly by spring immediately, gradually turns into... No, sometimes there are huge gaps. There's the creation, then the maintenance, and then the destruction, and there's a long period of time before the creation comes again. So that shows there's control. It's not just some automatic thing. There's control. There's a controller. So Prithu Maharaj is a representative of the power of the Lord, and therefore he's given a partial Sudarshana disc, not the original Sudarshana. And by the way, the original Sudarshana disc is a person. When Krishna wants, he calls for his personal weapon, Sudarshana, and comes in person and he gives him a mission. This yogi has offended my great devotee Ambarish Maharaj. Go and harass the hell out of him. So he does. He takes a mission. Yes, my Lord. And he goes and he chases, what's the yogi's name? Durvasa Muni, who was very big yogi. He could travel throughout the whole universe and even to the spiritual world. But ultimately, Lord Vishnu said, I can't help you. And Sudarshan has to accomplish his mission unless you go back to Ambarish Maharaj and beg forgiveness. So, take away from today, everything is personal. Everything is ultimately personal. And we're living in a bad neighborhood, this earth planet in Kali Yuga. So we can't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised. Many people are surprised at how badly things are deteriorated and how this war is spreading. And we're not surprised because we know it's Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga. People are crazy and they compound everything they do by doing more crazy things. Instead of sitting down calmly and contemplating the possible reactions to their actions, they just keep going down the same crazy path. Their solution to everything is to kill. And Krishna says that in the 16th chapter. He is my enemy and I've killed him, and all my other enemies would also be killed. That's their solution. But death is already there. Everybody's going to die. So Prabhupada said, what have you accomplished by killing somebody? They're only going to die. Not a big accomplishment if you kill them. You're just being used as the instrument. So yes, everything is personal. We're living in a bad neighborhood. And we didn't get to that last age, right? We just spoke about Dwapare Paricharyam, then Kalau Tadhari Kirtanam. In the Kali Yuga, the recommended process is Hari Kirtan. So we're all very fortunate. We've been sufficiently attracted to take to the process, so stay on the path. Don't let any crazy person deviate you in any way, shape, or form. We simply have to follow the principles and engage in Hari Kirtan, and success is guaranteed. So we'll stop here, maybe time for one question or comment, and then we'll go on to the next wonderful activity, which is breakfast prasadam. Anybody have any questions or comments? Yes.
Hare Krishna. So as...
I know you're a Columbia student, right? You go to school at Columbia?
Yes.
Yeah. PhD in which field again?
Electrical engineer.
Electrical engineering. And remind me your name, please. I'm very bad with names.
Nikhilesh.
Nikhilesh. Okay, Nikhilesh. What's your question?
So as you were talking about how everything is personal, so and I have heard that, as we have also heard, that Supreme Lord is present within atoms. We also have heard that soul is also present everywhere, just that it is dormant. So I just wanted to understand more about when we see everything is personal, so is it because we consider the dormant soul present and the super soul present with it, or is it that the soul actually is conscious and we are really offending the soul, the super soul?
The individual soul, you and I, we have three basic states of consciousness. The awakened state, like we are now, we're awake, we're interacting, the sleeping state, and the unconscious, totally unconscious state. Those are the three states. So, even if you say there's a soul present here, that soul is completely unconscious. And only Krishna can do that. Krishna can make us totally unconscious. Well, we can somehow do that. Let's say I've had 3 hernia operations, and one of them was complete knockout. The first one, complete knockout. They give you an injection, anesthetic, completely out. So you're still alive. The soul is always alive, but you're unconscious completely. They cut the body. It was at UCLA Harbor in Los Angeles, UCLA Harbor Hospital, and it was a training operation. So while I was out, they were training the students. This is how you cut. This is what you do. So the soul, we have to admit, can be put in a state of total unconsciousness. So even if you think there's soul in every atom of this wood here, that's completely unconscious. So not conscious that you're walking on them. However, the super soul is conscious. Super soul is always conscious, never unconscious. And that's why we have to treat everything with respect. Because even if there are jivas there, they're totally unconscious. But that super soul is supremely conscious. So everything, even when we're interacting with inanimate so-called objects, we have to understand the super soul is there. And therefore, generally, we recommend you don't kick anything. If you want to move the mat from here to there, you pick it up and move it. Generally, we recommend don't kick, because Krishna, in his form of super soul, is aware of everything. Make sense?
There's a follow-up question to it. So when we say Mother Nature or Bhumi Devi, so does it mean that there's not a supreme soul, but a more prominent soul which has its body as this earth? Or is it that the personality is totally different and this is the region which they control?
Think of your own body. You are an individual jiva in the region of the heart of this body. But within this body, there's so many other living entities that you're not conscious of. You're thinking that I am this particular body, Nikhilesh, 6 feet tall, weighing 160 pounds, whatever. You're thinking this is me. But within that body that you're thinking is you, there's so many other bodies that have souls in them thinking that this is me. There's some parasite, hopefully you don't have any parasites, but there's some parasites, there's so many other living entities within this individual body. So similarly, the planets, yes, Mother Bhumi, but it's a little bit different, because although we say this Earth planet is the body of Mother Bhumi, she has the advanced consciousness to be able to leave this body whenever she wants. So we know that in the beginning of the Krishna book, the world was overburdened with the unnecessary defense force of demoniac kings, so she went to see Brahma. You and I can't necessarily do that. We can't just put the body down upstairs and then go see Brahma. But the rulers of these different planets, they can do that. They can leave their external body and go in a subtle form, obviously, because no earthly body can travel to see Lord. Well, it could be if Christian desired, but generally speaking, in your earthly body, you can't go see the demigods. Yanti Deva Vrta Deva. And if you want to go to the abode of the demigods, then you have to worship them by a particular method. And then after you leave this body, you'll be given a suitable body to associate with the demigods. But the rulers of the planets, they can at will go to different other planets. Okay?
Thank you.
Jai, Grantarashima Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.